Looks like we are live for our webinar today. Thank you everybody for attending. Today's topic, as it shows on the slide, is operating lean and winning big, how the top builders are positioning for strength in any market. So we've got a couple of folks on, myself, Joel, Dan will run through some introductions. I did first want to let y'all know that if you have questions as we're going through the webinar today, you can ask them in the chat. We do hope to get to some of them at the end, but if we don't quite get to them and we run out of time, we do have the ability to see who has asked the questions, and we will get to you in an email or a call after this webinar.
Thanks, Jordan. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for our webinar on operating lean and winning big. I'm Joel LeBlanc. I'm the Chief Operating Officer here at TraceAir. I come from a 30-year background in operations and practicing lean as an approach to running an operation. And I look forward to talking to you all today about how we can win big and operate lean.
Perfect. Thanks, Joel. And I'm Jordan Wojtowecz. I am a senior account executive here at TraceAir and also a sales manager based in the San Antonio, Texas area. Really excited for this opportunity to have Dan chat with us today. I've been with TraceAir since 2021 and have known Dan ever since. So thanks, Dan. I will pass it over to you and have you introduce yourself.
Yeah, I'm Dan Galasso. I'm the Vice President of Land Ac and Development for TriPoint here in Colorado. I've been using TraceAir for I think since at least 21. We've used it on a number of different projects, and so far so good.
Excellent.
Great, thanks, Dan. Now let's start with what's real right now. You know, how has pressure changed and how you're expected to lead and deliver results in your organization?
As everybody knows, deliveries are kind of down, or well, orders are kind of down right now. So we're working hard and that's coming with price pressures. So we're working hard to reduce margin, to reduce costs, to improve margins. And so with that comes all the different things, you know, between talking to our trades and also with our people. So there's been changes with people. Our team has gotten smaller by a few. So my team is just about half of what it was a year ago this time. So
yeah, so when you think about that, when resources are getting tight, you know, those small missteps really have big ripple effects. How have you seen margin get lost, and what are you doing to build more discipline into your operation to ensure that margin leakage doesn't occur?
I mean, we're really in we've tried to stay disciplined the entire time, but you know, the focus becomes greater on making sure that you're monitoring everything that's going in. You know, you're monitoring your invoices closer. You're monitoring any kind of changes closer. We've always really tried hard to keep that under control, but now we have less people to do it with. So we have to start looking to different tools to help us do more with less.
Mm-hmm. Dan, just a follow-up question on that. You mentioned you're having to monitor invoices a little bit more closely. Can you tell us a little bit about how TraceAir is helping you specifically for invoices and the billing side of things?
Yeah, so you know, typically we try to get on site to make sure we're measuring, you know, how much pipe has been installed, you know, keeping an eye on how far we've gotten on grading, all of those kind of things. Inevitably, though, an invoice comes through and you're sitting there looking at the invoice. I'm sitting looking at the invoice. Probably my project manager, or I should say, my project manager has definitely been out verifying everything in the field. But I may have not been out recently enough to review. And so a lot of times I'll pull up TraceAir, and it's really easy to get into TraceAir, see where I was a month ago, where I'm at today. On our active land development projects, we currently have a flight done once a week. And so I can easily pull up 4 weeks back. I can look at the date of the invoice. I can pull up what happened in that time period from that invoice moving forward. I can measure how much dirt was roughly moved. It's a little bit tougher on the dirt front than it is on the wet utility front, but you can easily measure from week to week how much was installed and what kind of dirt was moved, what kind of quantities were installed. We use it all the way through to the end of the project for that purpose.
Perfect. So for you, it's really a couple things is what I'm hearing. The documentation is key, right? If you don't have a way of documenting the site work, then it's going to be a lot harder to either show when something did or did not occur. And you're using that currently with your team now, right? And
Yep.
I know it's always a priority to try to make it out to your sites,
Yep.
but you're limited on the time you have when you get
Mhm.
out there. And it's also hard to exactly quantify, what is there in a stockpile or how much was moved. So definitely appreciate you kind of sharing some insight there. So
Yep.
going on to our next question. I know you've got several communities going on in your division there in Denver. Some are probably in acquisition vertical, and then you've got some, in the actual earthwork stage. So how are you staying in control without being pulled into every detail? And tell us about how TraceAir helps with that visibility.
Yeah. So, really, I have 3 project managers right now. Two of them are more field based. One is more office based. My 2 field project managers, they're in the field every day. At least 3 days. I shouldn't say every day. At least 3 days a week, they're in the field on the sites. I try to get out to sites once a week. That can be a little bit difficult, and 2 weeks can pass without me getting to a site. The nice thing with TraceAir is I do have that scan that comes in every week. So I can fall back on that. I can get a question. There's a lot of times our project managers will come back and I'll be having a conversation with them about what's going on the site. And rather than just explaining, it's really, really easy to pull up TraceAir. We open it up, we look at it, we walk through. Yep, right there, right there. You can see what's happening. That's last week. This is this week. You can see where they've gone and what they've done. And so that's how we really use it to stay in control of things. And like I said, I can use it to look up. I'm our project managers tell me where they're at. Yeah, I look at it and go, oh yeah, that's exactly where you're at. Or well, I mean that might be. I don't think you're quite as far along as that. And so we use it that way to stay in control, and then just to, as we discussed earlier, to keep our contractors honest, so to speak, right?
Mhm. So in terms of the dirt movement and seeing where you're at, right? You could be thinking, yeah, I think I'm about 70 to 75% complete. But
Hmm.
then when you come into TraceAir and look at your most recent scan, you might run a tool such as the cut fill balance tool,
Absolutely.
which I'll show you guys real quick. I know you love that one along with the cross section tool. So
Uh-huh.
the thing about TraceAir, right? When Dan has his projects flown, we're also taking into consideration his CAD file, so his design grade. So this is really key, right? Photos certainly tell a story. But with our tools, he's actually able to go in and say, all right, I'm heavy about 35,000, cubic yards. And so does that really line up with other answers in the field or what we were thinking? And then if not, we can take this and just have a collaborative, honest conversation and come up with a game plan to potentially get us back on schedule. So this is just a snippet of one of the many tools that Dan currently uses
Right.
um,
And,
for
and
for
Jordan,
that
as you know,
aspect.
I'm sorry. Uh,
Go ahead.
as you
Mhm.
know, it's sometimes hard to nail down the shrink or the swell that you're going to get out of a project, especially on some larger project. You start getting into a lot larger 600,000 yard, million yard jobs, and you start looking at what do you think that soil is going to do from a shrink swell standpoint. And
Mhm.
it can be difficult to figure that out with your engineer and your geotech. We always try. Um, the great thing about this is you can monitor that in almost real time. If you're getting scans every week, we've gone back and monitored that, and we provide that information to our consultants, and we can almost kind of redesign the grade on the site on the fly. we try to leave ourselves some flexibility in open space areas where we can either mine some more dirt out or place some dirt to kind of
Hmm.
give us a little bit of balance there, give us a little bit of a room in the balance.
Sure. Yeah, that's a great point, Dan, the shrink and swell factors that you're going to have to be dealing with. And that varies depending on where your site is going to be. So if you know those factors and want to factor it into your measurements, you can actually put in your percentage factors into TraceAir, and it will give you a little bit more of a fine-tuned
Mhm.
answer with those. But I want to move on to our next question here, Joel.
Yeah, so Dan, you talked about you mentioned you're running lean in terms of head count, and with fewer people and more work to spread around amongst those fewer people. How do you see that you could scale responsibly without you know burning out your team or stretching things too thin to
Mhm.
where you're becoming ineffective?
Again, we know that we have one of our larger active sites right now. We know we get a scan every Monday or Tuesday. So I've scheduled my meetings on Mondays because I know my project manager can be on the site or in the office on Monday, and by Tuesday morning he has a scan so he can see what happened on Monday if he needs to, and then he plans his on-site days, maybe a little bit later in the week, Wednesday, Thursday, or Thursday, Friday, to be on site. We're able to get eyes on the site a couple days a week that way, a couple times a week that way, where this site that I'm talking about is 45 minutes at least, with no traffic, it's about 45 minutes from our office. So to get up there and back, you burn a couple hours out of your day in just windshield time. And so it's really nice to be able to do this. And that way he can be here in the office getting some office work done on Monday and even Tuesday if he needs to, and he has a scan coming in, he can see what's happening on the site. If what was promised when he was up there on Wednesday, Thursday, or Thursday, Friday, if what the contractor promised was going to get done, is getting done. And so that's just another way to kind of leverage this into less people, right?
Great, thanks, Dan. Jordan,
Perfect.
turn it to you.
Yes. Okay, so added cost and delays. Dan, tell us about where those usually sneak in, and then what's helping you to keep more control and momentum across your projects.
So costs sneak in all over the place. One of the big places they sneak in though is handoffs and the delays sneak in and handoffs from one contractor to the next.
Hmm.
Typically we have our graders go in and they do a really good job getting everything to grade. We have surveyors checking. We have grade certs that show that everything was to grade. But there's always a gap in the timing of when you had your grade cert done versus when your wet utility person started. And a lot of times we get through wet utilities well, you get through grading, the site looks great. I mean, it's picture perfect once all the certifications are done, and then your wet utility guys get in there and it looks like a bombing range again, and there's piles everywhere. Streets aren't defined anymore. It looks a lot different. Ideally, when your wet utility guys leave, they leave it in a condition where you're at least plus or minus 2/10. That's what our contract has with them. And so we'll get in there, and a lot of times we'll find something, and we'll find where we're off by more than plus or minus 2/10. It's always somebody else's fault, right? There's always oh, it wasn't us. That was like that when we got there. And so it's really easy to go into this and go, okay, you started on this day. Here's the scan from 3, 4 days before, a week before. This is what it looks like. You can go in, you can use the cross section tool and pull it up. We were on grade when you started. So it's your responsibility per your contract to go back and do that. So that's one of the place costs sneak in that we just had that recently. I was just talking to one of my project managers, went through it with our wet utility contractor. They said, no, like that. He was like, it wasn't, I promise. They have access to TraceAir. That's one of the things that's really great one of my favorite things about TraceAir is it's really easy for me to share access to a project with my contractor, with my consultants, I've shared it with municipalities. Anybody who has an interest in looking at the progress of the site, we're able to share very easily and we can also revoke that if we want as well.
Mhm.
But in this case, he went in and said, "Hey, go ahead, go look at it yourself. You can. Here's the date that you guys started. Here's the date of the scan. Go pull the scan and look at it. Run a cross section in there, and or run a cut fill. You can see it was on grade, and so they actually went in, and that was the end of the argument. They didn't argue any further that they were responsible, and so they went in, they got a blade and went back in and cleaned the grade up. And to us, that's probably, in this case, that was probably 20 or $30,000. It was a decent sized project. So to have them go
Wow.
back in and get it fine graded and get the dirt back where it belonged was a big savings.
Yeah. Yeah, let's talk a little bit about the handoff, right? Whether it's okay, we're finished with development, we're handing it off to the vertical side, or all right, we're finished with our grading, it's time for utilities to come in. You mentioned such a great point, Dan, about being able to see all of the dates, right?
Yep.
Go back in time, right? Because, if we're flying, typically we're flying about every other week, sometimes weekly, as well for our clients. So there is an advantage to having that consistent documentation because to your point, Dan, right, you're able to pull TraceAir up, right, with all your trade partners as that single source of truth. So
Mhm.
it can really kind of prevent that conversation from dragging out. And then, we hope it doesn't come to it, right? But disputes, right? We're always trying to avoid those or avoid the pointing of the finger, right? Things like that. So
Mhm.
the fact that we have the documentation here is crucial. And even with the handoff onto, the vertical side, I mean, who knows how long things can sit right before somebody else comes in. So if, you're doing this correctly and you left it where it should be, you have then the documentation to show, okay, here's how we left it. We're within, 2/10 where we need to be with our grades. And while I'm in here, I do just want to show audience, I know we probably have a lot of listeners on the webinar that use TraceAir, but maybe we have some that aren't as, familiar with TraceAir. So talking about things like lot viewer, especially when you're talking about the handoff to vertical or being able to verify that things are within your tolerance. This is crucial, just being able to see the breakdown of the cut and fill on a per lot basis, as well as all of your spot elevations. And you can come in here and say, all right, well, we're at point 2 here. That's good for the criteria, for our as-builts. We can look over here and say, well, maybe some of these are, half a foot or a foot above or below. So it does also allow our clients to do any rework because we know it's extremely expensive. Dan, you've told me this before, to bring equipment back on site when they've already left. And
Mhm.
so we want our customers to be proactive, right, versus reactive. So that's also key here and one of the tools that can help with that.
Now,
Okay. Oh, Joel?
now when you're looking ahead, I mean, you're thinking about the future as the market rebounds. What are you doing to make sure that you're positioned in your team's positioned to react quickly and strongly on the market rebound?
So, it's the same. When we get started back up, uh, we're going to have to get started back up and get going with the same people we have right now, right? We're not going to be able to ramp up that fast and go, oh, hey, look, we're looking at 4 new projects. We need to get another project manager. That's not typically how it operates. We have to get going with what we have right now. So as we start looking at new projects again, and we're moving forward on new projects, that's where we start looking at using TraceAir outside of the development function. We start looking at it maybe on the acquisition side as well, because we can get out there and get a scan on a site. There's the ability to do a scan. If you have a site that has a lot of vegetation on it, there is the ability to do a LiDAR scan on a site. So you can get out and do a LiDAR scan on a site, and you can find where your grade is at. I'm sure everybody on this call has had a project or two where the engineer went and designed the whole site, and they really only checked the grade in a couple spots. And you get onto site and get going, and you find out, well, the grade doesn't match up at the perimeter all the way around. You know, talking about starting out with speed and strength, you get a scan out there as you're going through entitlements and provide that to your consultant, and now you've got the ability to tie that site in all the way around. You're going to find if there's some topo that got missed, if you didn't order a full topo on the site, which can be expensive and also time consuming with traditional survey methods. This can get out there and give you really accurate results, and with one scan. You can provide that to your consultant, get it going strong, and make sure that your grades are tying in. And then again, it's the time that takes to get somebody out there to fully walk a site. Obviously, we go out and get boots on the ground on all of our new sites as we're looking at them before we move forward on them. But it's hard. Sometimes you have 100-acre site, and it's pretty hard. Sometimes there's some topo on it. There's different obstructions on it. It'd be hard to get out there and get all the way around the site and see everything. You'd have to get all the way around the site, traverse the site to see everything that TraceAir could see in one scan. So I think that's probably, as we talk about speed and strength moving as the market rebounds, we definitely want to do that. And then things like the lot viewer are great too, right? Because we can evaluate even finished lot deals. You could go evaluate a finished lot deal and go, oh, hey, look at where the dirt's at on this deal. And we'll be able to know if we're gonna have too much dirt, not enough dirt. We can start evaluating those kind of things.
Yeah, that's perfect. I appreciate you going through the different stages of
Yeah.
the process and talking about TraceAir, and that's something that I want to clarify for everybody here. So the majority of the scans, or what I was showing previously on the demo environment, right? That's those are our regular gold or platinum scans that we perform when the grading has started, so that Dan is able to compare against his design grade. When you're in the due diligence or acquisition phase and you have a lot of vegetation, that's when we can use our LiDAR technology. And our LiDAR, it's really neat. It can actually be put into the software as well, so that our clients have an interactive deliverable. And there's a couple things that are important to understand about the due diligence phase is, if you're not getting accurate LiDAR information, a lot of times maybe you're relying on GIS topo or something from the county. And it's crucial to remember that we don't know exactly when that data was collected, how it was collected. And a lot of times, some of the dirt busts and things that you might see down the road actually come from not having a true original ground topo from the very beginning. So what Dan is talking about is, starting off a project very strong, knowing exactly what you're getting into. And that can also, Dan mentioned his contractors are in TraceAir, engineers, right? It's a platform that's meant to be collaborative, right? So you can have your engineers all work together within TraceAir to really understand the topography. If changes need to be made to a design grade, if that's already been in place, TraceAir can also help with that, because you know exactly what you're dealing with in terms of your original grade and topography and all of that good stuff. So I think this is probably our final question. Dan, I want to hear from you directly. So, there's folks out there that maybe haven't used TraceAir before, right? Or they're still relying on traditional tools or field updates alone for their land development process. What would you tell them about the importance of using TraceAir on your projects, and more importantly, the repercussions of not using a tool like TraceAir on your projects?
Yeah, I mean, the impact is tremendous. You touched on it earlier, Jordan. It's in the documentation, right? It's in being able to go in and see what's happened with fairly good detail. I get made fun of because I use Google Earth a lot, and so I get made fun of that. TraceAir is my favorite tool, and then Google Earth is my second favorite tool. But it really is. You can go in and you can look at the history. I shared a story earlier with another group about, I was talking to our customer care manager, and he had a project where we had a homeowner who kind of said, well, I've had water running across the sidewalk in front of my house the entire time I've since I purchased it, it's been running. And so he called me in and said he was looking through Google Earth, and I said, well, hey, we have something a little more detailed than that. You want to try TraceAir out? And he went on and went through TraceAir. Since it is so collaborative, I sent him a link. He was able to open it on his own, go right into the project. I don't know how much time he spent in it, but he spent an hour or so in it, going back through, tracking through all the dates that we had. We had it at that time. We were doing the community week. We were scanning the community weekly, and he tracked it back and then tracked it against weather reports for those times, and said, "Oh no, look, there really wasn't water running across the sidewalk unless there was a storm event." And so, to the customer, their perception was, yeah, when there was a storm, there was water running across the sidewalk. It dried up and moved on and was dry until the next storm. So, that's just those impacts alone in how as we've been using this, and the more we use it, the more we're finding uses throughout construction, customer care, land, throughout the entire cycle of a community. And I tell you, we had our national VP of Ops at one time was using it as well, and he would look at our scans, and every now and again I'd get a random call from him on, hey, what's going on here? What is this on this site? What is going on that? And so it was always good for that type of collaboration as well. But versus traditional tools, it's pretty hard to get a good picture of a site just standing on it. And here we can get a good overhead. There's the panoramic view. I've used the panoramic view for presentations that we've done. We'll have a panoramic view of a site, and we have to put a presentation out for different reasons. And it's really great to go in and pull a panorama from your site, it kind of where it was, where it's been. Yeah, you can always get a great view across the horizon. So even, to some extent for different types of marketing materials, you have this. You don't have to pay somebody to go out and get this type of photography. It's already in your system. That answer the question?
It does. Thanks, Dan. And, just to wrap up, what does keep you up at night? And what's one piece of advice that you would give for operating lean right now?
Oh, it's always budget and schedule that keeps you up at night. My advice would be use every tool you can. Technology's coming. Its impact and influence is growing every day. And so I think the more we embrace technology, the more we're going to be able to do with less. And that's what we're talking about today, right? Is just how much more can you do with less? And so the only way you can continue to do more with less is to embrace technology and use the technology tools that we have to do that.
Perfect.
Thanks,
Another question that we got is, and I don't know what happened to my video here. There we go. Another question that we received in the chat is it an added cost to have your contractors or other trade partners in the platform? The answer is no. It is unlimited access, so you can invite whoever you need to, right? We want it to be collaborative. So I think we're just at right at time. I think there were maybe some other questions that we didn't get to, but I want to kind of end it just a brief, general overview of TraceAir again. So we're software company, right? Not a drone company. And all of the scans that we provide, right, for earthwork movement, our processing time is 24 hours. So we turn that around in 24 hours. It's all processed and available to our customers the next day. With LiDAR, it's about 72 hours. So a little bit longer, but still 3 business days compared to other means of getting that could take a couple of weeks. So did want to just touch on that and highlight it. But we are at the end of of our time here. I want to thank Dan, again, thank you so much for sharing your experience, not only with TraceAir, but the current market conditions and what you're doing, how it's impacting you, and to our audience today, current customers, those that maybe haven't seen an official demo of TraceAir, please reach out to us if you have an interest in scheduling a demo, and we would be happy to have a one-on-one conversation with you guys to learn a little bit more about your needs. But want to thank you guys again for that. And there should be an email here. Yes. So info@traceair.net. If you will send that to us, we will put you in touch with the right person depending on what it is that you're looking for. All right.